Okay, namaste and good morning to all of you. Let's start the class with prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhu Bhuva Swaha, Tat Savitra Varenayam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamya. Om Sena Vavatu Sena Bhunaktu Saviryam Karvavahi Tejasvi Navadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti 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 Om. Vivekachudamani, verse number 394. Or in your books, it could be 393. Akashvat nirmal, nirvikalpam nisim, nisapandhan, nirvikaram, antar bahir shunyam, ananyam advayam swayam param brahma kim asti bodhavyam. Akashvat, like the sky. Nirmal, without any mal, nirmal, untainted. Nirvikalpam, no vikalpa, absolute. Niseem, limitless, no seema, no boundaries. Nisapandhan, without any movement. Nirvikaram, without any vikar, without any modifications. Antar bahir shunyam, which has neither an inside or an outside. Ananyam, not different. That means not different from the self. Advayam, non-dual. Swayam, oneself. Param Brahma is the supreme Brahma. Kim asti? Is there anything? Bodhavyam, to be known. It's like a question over here at end. So like the sky, the supreme Brahma is untainted, absolute, limitless, motionless, and without modifications. It has neither an inside nor an outside. It is one existence and non-dual and is one's own self. Is there any other thing to be known? Because everything else we know, they are limited. Some place they are, some place they are not. Always limited. Brahma, supreme Brahma, is the only who has all these characteristics. So over here with all these beautiful terms, Shankaracharya ji is trying to indicate something which is incomprehensible for our intellect. So again, these are just the pointers towards that absolute truth. These could be the methods also for our contemplation, which is called nididhyas. So when we meditate, this is what we are trying to understand. Why do we need to transcend our lower mind, lower intellect to get in touch with this, to understand this? So this is almost like a technique. So what exactly is to be done at the mental and intellectual level in the seat of meditation? That's what he's telling us. This becomes extremely subjective because it is not an object which he's talking about. When he says it's outside, inside, It's everywhere. It's limitless. It's motionless. It's modification, no modifications. So this is a subjective reality. So this is what to a very large extent brought out what exactly should be the line of our contemplation on the seat of meditation. So nature of the Brahm, characteristics of the Brahm has been depicted. So this is not just to read. This is also not just to repeat. This should help us to lift our minds to this experience. So we need to have experience of this. What is that which doesn't move? What is that which is all blissful? What is that which doesn't have any boundaries? I want to experience that. All our life, we just run outside to experience different things, different places. We like to meet people, but those are all limited. No matter where we go, what we have, there's a limit to it. This is something which is limitless, boundaryless. So that's why he says this great reality is like space. It's not a space, it's like space. Because space is something we can see that no boundaries. Without any impurity in the space, no disturbance in the space. So if we make our own mind this pure, where we find nothing can limit us, like infinite space, where there's no other object to condition us, where there's no activity, no change, we say, yeah, wow, this is the experience we are looking for. And these changes take place, the changes will go through all the time. They take place in the relative world with birth, with growth, with decay, with dissolution. In Sanskrit, it's called Utpatti, Vriddhi, Nash, Vilay. But in Brahma, none of that happens. That's why self is not born. Self is not born, there's no growth in it, there's no decay in it, and there's no dissolution of the self. When we say pralya happens to what? Not to the Atma, not to the Supreme. Pralya is happening only to what was created, not to the self. Because these are the very common modifications through which living creatures constantly pass. We are all familiar with those changes. So these changes can take place only in the realm of time to limited objects. In the infinite, there's no change ever possible. So that's why it's an objectless state of pure awareness. And this is self-evident because it is the Supreme Brahma. And having known this, towards the end, he says, having known this, something so great, something so profound, what else is there to know? There's no desires left. Nothing to do, nothing to see, nothing to achieve. Let me read it again. Beautiful verse, very poetic. Like the sky, the Supreme Brahm is untainted, absolute, limitless, motionless, and without modifications. It has neither an inside nor an outside. It is one existence and non-dual and is one's own self. Is there any other thing to be known? Just reading it, reciting it, gives you the peace. Can you imagine when we experience it, where we will be? So that's why on the seat of meditation, we are supposed to contemplate on this. Next one. Vaktavyam kimu vidyate atra bahudah Brahm eva jiva swayam Brahm etat jagat atatam nu saklam Brahm advityam shruti Brahm eva aham iti Prabuddham teya santyakt bahya safutam Brahmi bhuya vasanti santatat Chida anand atman etat dhruvam Vaktavyam, to be said. Kim, what? Vidyate is atra, here. Bahuda, in many ways, like a more and more. Brahma eva jiva swayam. The Jeev himself is the Brahma. Brahma, etat jagat, the universe. Atatam, expands. Nu means verily. Sakalam, the whole, the complete. Brahma. Advityam is non-dual. Shruti, that is the primary scriptures, Shruti. Brahma ev aham iti. Brahma alone I am. So this is like a, from the Shruti, this is saying, Brahma alone I am. Brahma ev aham iti. For Buddham taya, those who are enlightened. Santyakt bahya, who have given up their association with the outside world. Tyakt, completely. Safutam, very well. Brahmi bhuye, becoming Brahma. Vasanti, they live. Like a vas karna, vasanti. Sant tat, ever. Chidanand Atman, as the self which is consciousness and bliss. Etat means this, dhruvam, certain. Shankaracharya is saying, what is the use of enlarging upon this subject? Vaktamyam kivu vidyate atra bahuda. What else is there to need? There's no need to say anything more. So what is the use of enlarging upon this subject? The Jeev is nothing but Brahma. The whole expanse of this universe is nothing but Brahma. Shruti points out Brahma as being non-dual. And it is an undeniable fact that those who are enlightened, who have established their identity with Brahma, and who have given up their association with the outside world, live ever in union with Brahma. Eternal knowledge and bliss. So if you want to understand, this is a number, I think 394, Poonam. Okay. So in the state of pure awareness, when we experience this infinite, subjective experience, or people say when the awakening has happened, when we have transcended our body, mind, intellect, all of that seems very illusory to us. This is what the reality we experience. Normally, it seems unreal to us, this kind of experience. But once we experience this, everything else seems unreal. That means the temporary. Okay, so real and unreal means temporary or permanent. So no other discussion is possible because it's a non-dual. In this great infinite experience, what more remains to be said? So that means there's nothing you can express. Words cannot express. Words are so limited, so finite. They cannot express the infinite. So at that moment, the meditator awakens to understand that he is none other than Brahma. That's why that Mahavakya, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahma. Those are not just utterances, those are the experiences. This Brahm alone is the essence of which the world of polarity is constituted. And a person who has experienced this is a wise person. Sure, it started out with a study and then reflection, then nididhyasan, then the truth is experienced that I am Brahm. And once you know that you are Brahm, everything else is Brahm, there's nothing more to discuss. Because all the discussions are where? They're in the relative field. And there's no relativity there, it's absolute. So such a wise person lives becoming one with the Brahm. Brahmi Bhuya. Awaken to this state of supreme consciousness. Let's look at the next one. Jahi mal me koshe aham dhiya ut thapit asham prasbhavam anil kalpe ling dehe api paschat nigam gadit kirtim nityam anand murtim swayam pariche brahma rupen tishtha. Jahi means annihilate, like removing something completely, annihilate. Mal me koshe, in the filthy sheath. And what is a filthy sheath? Our gross body. Mal me. Aham dhiya, by the ego, the sense of I. Utthapit, raised, like a generated. Asham, the hopes. And hopes means the attachments. Prasbhavam, with force. Anil kalpehe, air like. Anil means air. So like air. Ling dehe, with a subtle body. So he's calling the gross body mal me kosh and a subtle body ling dehe. Api also. Paschat then nigam gadit kirtim, the glory eulogized by the scriptures. It's like a glorified. Nityam, eternal. Anand murtim, personification of bliss. Swayam itself is me. Iti means thus. Parichiye, realizing. Brahma rupen, as Brahma. Tishtha, that means live. Annihilate the hopes raised by the ego in the gross body. A bundle of filth. Then with force, do the same with the air-like subtle body. Realizing Brahma, the personification of eternal bliss, which the scriptures glorify as your own self. Live as Brahma. Okay, so he is telling us, detach from this physical body by understanding that this is full of filth. Then with the great force, because mental detachment is harder, so we have to do it, use some force also. Detach from the subtle body also. And realize who you are. So leave the idea of I am this body, which is a bundle of fecal matter. He talked about it earlier in this scripture in detail. He said, sure, it looks beautiful from outside, but it's packed with all the mal. That's why he called it a mal mein khosh. Leave the vulgar, sensuous desires arising from this mal mein khosh. Then go beyond to the ear-like subtle body. That is a mind and intellect. Mind and intellect are called ear-like. Why? Because thoughts are they just fly. Right now we have this thought. Before we know it flies away. So ear-like. They fly all over. So transcend this mind and intellect. Realize your real nature, which is bliss. Because this is what has been glorified in the scriptures. Understand that you are nothing but Brahm. Determined to have this experience. While remaining in this world, revel in this that you are one with Brahma. Only if we can detach from the lower, only then we can attain the higher. Remember that. But if we are so attached to the lower, so attached to this body, or not, sometimes not just the body, we are so attached to the things which are outside of the body, the external objects, so attached. So we constantly move far and far away from the subjective experience. Let's look at the next one. Shavakaram yavat bhajati manujaha tavat ashuchi parebhya sayat kaleshaha janan maran vyadhi nilyah yada atmanam shuddham kalyati shivakaram achalam tada tebhya muktaha bhavati hi tat aha shruti api. Shav akaram. Shav means a corpse. So body like a corpse. Yavat, as long as. Bhajati, worships. Manuja, a man, a person. Tavat, so long. Ashuchi, impure. See, shuchi is pure, ashuchi, impure. Parebhya, from others. Sayat, there is. Kaleshaha, suffering. Janan maran vyadhi nilyaha, birth, death, and disease. Yada means when. Atmanam, atma. Shuddham, pure. Kalyati, thinks. Shivakara, auspicious. See, there's a Shav Akar and a Shiv Akar. So Shav Akar was like a corpse. Shiv Akar is auspicious. Achalam, the immovable. Tada means then, tebhya, from them. Muktaha bhavati, becomes liberated. He means certainly. Tat means that. Ah means testifies. Shruti, the scriptures. Api means also. As long as man worships his corpse like body, he is impure and suffers from others and from birth, death, and disease. But when he thinks of himself as the pure, the auspicious, the immovable, certainly he becomes free from them. The Shruti also testifies to it. So this is a unanimous declaration of the Upanishads. So as long as we identify with our physical body that I am this body, the body which is composed of the matter, it is like a shav akar, impure. But naturally, when you identify with it, you will suffer a lot more. I am this body. It's getting old. It's getting weak. It's going to die. Sure, you will suffer. Objectively, you suffer because of the clashes with other objects. And subjectively, you suffer from the sequence of the sorrows produced by birth, growth, disease, decay, death. All those changes, anytime there's a change, you don't like it. And not liking it makes our mind go through the suffering. So it's like a 5 pain, full of pain, or you can say pain-ridden stages. Okay, so birth, growth, disease, decay, and death. And how to get rid of these sorrows? By realizing the truth. If I don't attach my mind to my car, no suffering. I'm not my car. It's something, instrument I need to use. I'm not my house. Sure, I live in the house. There's no suffering if the house falls apart. The same way with this body also. And especially when we know the nature of any object is to get old and ultimately fall apart. Anything. The biggest of the buildings and the tallest of the mountains, they all shrivel. They go through the change. So when we know this in reality, then what is the suffering? So when the truth is realized, you become the immovable behind all the movable. So you are the constant behind all the changes, all the changeable, all the variable substances. There is a substratum and you are the substratum. That's why he said you become the Shiv Akar, embodiment of the auspiciousness. Only then you are liberated from all sufferings. See, liberation is from the sufferings. So this is what Upanishads say, all the Upanishads. So Shruti also testifies to this. Let's look at next one. Swa Atmani aropit ashesh abhasaha vastu nirasata swayam eva param brahma purnam advayam akriyam. Swa Atmani, on one's own self, aropit, superimposed, ashesh, all. See, shesh means what is remainder. Ashesh means it's complete, nothing remaining. Abhasaha vastu nirasata, by the removal of the apparently existent things. Abhas vastu nirasata, by the removal of the apparently existent things. Swayam eva, oneself alone. Param Brahma, the supreme Brahma. Purnam, infinite. Advayam, non-dual. Akriyam, beyond all activities. When the apparent existence is superimposed on the self, are removed, then what remains is the supreme Brahma, the infinite, non-dual, that which is beyond all activities, alone, all by itself. So all the projections, see on a screen, you can have all kinds of projections on it. There is sometimes comedy is being playing, and sometimes there's a love story or a natural scene. When you remove it all, what is that? Just a blank screen, substratum. So this is what he's saying. When all the delusory projections, the body, mind, and intellect have been negated, what remains is the self. When I realize I am not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the intellect, I am only the soul, which is nothing other than the supreme God, absolute truth. So that's what's called the transcending the lower and attaining the higher. I am the supreme Brahman. This realization is called self-realization or God realization or awakening to the truth. And Brahman is realized as one's own self. Sure, we want to see God outside. It's easier to see inside because it's everywhere. There's no inside or outside. It's always easy to see something which is closer, or your mind think it's closer. Easy to grasp it. So that's why in your meditation, just go inside, layer after layer, go inside. That's where it's sitting all the time. So these ideas are very often repeated in the scriptures. Why they are repeated? Because these great acharyas, whether it's a Gita Acharya, Lord Krishna, or in this scripture, Shankaracharya ji, they just want us to catch it somehow. Through some verse, we catch it. It's thrown to us again and again. And then once we catch it, then we feel the total effect of it. Okay? Because that is the goal of all of us. Have a subjective experience of this. Let's look at next one. Sama hitayam sati chitvritau paratmani brahmani nirvikalpehe na drishyate kaschit ayam vikalpaha prajalap matraha parishishyate yataha. Samahityayam sati chitvritau. When the function of the mind have been quietened, samahit, okay, quietened. So when the function of the mind, chitvritti is what? A function of the mind. So when the function of the mind have been quietened, paratmane, in the Paramatma, in the highest, in the lower, this mind keeps on fluctuating. Because lower keeps on fluctuating. Brahmani, the Brahma, Nirvikalpe, the absolute, na drishyate, is not perceived. Kaschit, any, ayam, this, vikalpaha, polarity, prajalap matraha, a mere talk, prajalap, parishishyate, remains to be, yataha, where? When the functions of the mind, and what is that? The thoughts have merged in the Paramatma. Because sometimes we wonder, what should I do with the mind? It's so powerful. What should I do with it? What should I do with my intellect? Lord Krishna said, absorb that into me. This is what Shankaracharya ji is saying. When the functions of the mind, the thoughts have merged in the Paramatma, the Brahma. the absolute, then this phenomenal world is not perceived. Then everything just becomes a mere talk. Because you have absorbed into the highest, there's nothing else to say. When the higher is perceived, you have absorbed, everything else is so superficial. There's nothing more to say. So that's why they say that quieten your thought flow. Contemplate on the Brahma. Do not get attracted to the turbulation of this world. And that is called transcending the mind. And when the mind has been transcended, it's not available then. Because it has absorbed into the highest. No more imagination. No more thinking whether this is right or that is right. It's almost like you have stopped the mental fluctuations. All the mental processes and the functions, they have been stopped. Because it has found the best, the highest. Now we'll see in the next few verses, Shankaracharya ji is indicating to us the total non-existence of the polarity. But this is available for the experience if we have been doing what he has been telling us. Okay? Because for us, it does exist. The body exists. The world exists. And all the sorrows also with the world exist. But when we have transcended, when we have reached there, this is what happens. At least it's good to read about it, and this is where we get some encouragement to keep on doing the meditations, keep on doing what he's telling us to do. Satkalpaha, vikalpaha, ayam vishwam iti, ek vastuni nirvikare, nirakare, nirvisheshe bhidakuta. Satkalpaha, a mere fancy, like an unreal appearance. Vikalpaha, concept or imagination. I am this. Vishwam iti, that there is the universe. Ek vastuni, in the one reality. Nirvikare, in the changeless. Nirakare, the formless. Nirvisheshe, the absolute. Bhida, diversity. Kutaha, how can there be? In the one reality, the conception of the universe is a mere fancy, mere imagination. How can there be any diversity in the changeless, the formless, the absolute? So that's why I said this is when we have reached there, or we are moving towards it, or we have a faith in the words of our Guru, then we can see that. Yeah, these are true. These are beautiful verses. How can it happen? Only through direct experience. Sure, Shankaracharya is telling us, but for us, we have to have a direct experience, which is called Anubhav. But before Anubhav, we are supposed to use some yukti, the logical reasoning also. So we are going through the logical reasoning because we have a faith in these scriptures. But then we have examples in front of us also, which is called Drishtant. These Drishtants are given in the scriptures. When we study Bhagavad Puran, when we study Mahabharata, when we study Ramayana, Those great scriptures, when we study, we see the drishtants. And the Shruti, of course, scriptural statements. These are the four methods of teachings, actually. That's why the teachers, they use these. Whether we study the Upanishads also, they use these. Anubhav, Yukti, Drishtant, and Shruti. So again, Anubhav means through direct experience. So ultimately, we have to have our own experience. But before we have the experience, we have to do the sadhana. But in order to have faith in the sadhana, why am I doing it? That's why those examples, they come in very handy. So Anubhav is direct experience, Yukti is logical reasoning, Drishtant is the examples. That's why those stories of all those avatars, when they came, there have been so many Drishtants. And Shruti is the scriptural statements. So four methods of teachings, and all these four methods, these acharyas, they indicate to us that duality does not exist at all. It seems real to us, but it's not. Because this reality is without change, nirvikar. It's without form. Because form is only to this manifested. Nirakar and absolute, nirvishesh. So this is the divinity. And the entire phenomenal world, even though it seems real to us, it's non-existent. And that's, from that sense, it said it's an illusion of the mind. This mind is so powerful, it creates things. And the collective mind is creating even bigger things. Creation of the mind. दृष्टि दर्शन दृश्य आदि भाव शून्य एक वस्तुनि निर्विकारे निराकारे निर्विशेषे भिदाकुता. The second line is repeated again and again in these verses to put the emphasis on what he's trying to tell us. Drishtri darshan drishya adi. Drishtri is the seer, the knower. Darshan is the seeing, the knowing. Drishya is the seen, the known. Okay? So it's like in the one reality, bhav shunya ek vastune. In the one reality, which is devoid of the concepts of the seer, seeing, and seen, etc. This is what it means. And nirvikare, changeless, nirakare, formless, nirvisheshe, absolute, bhida, diversity, kutaha. How can it be? So in the one reality, which is without the seer, the seeing, and the seen, don't we often talk about that this is a samadhi? Because when we try to concentrate, there are three things. There's a seer also, the seen also, and the object of a seeing also. Three things. But when we reach the meditation, only two things are remaining. When there are samadhi, just one. Devoid of all that, devoid of effort, devoid of me. So in the one reality, which is without the seer, the seeing, and the seen, etc., which is the changeless, formless, absolute, how can there be any diversity? So he's really talking about that highest samadhi, nirvikalp samadhi, where there's no distinction between these. It's only the substratum. It's only one, non-dual. A few more verses like this, where he's taking our mind towards that highest, the one, blissful. Let's stop it here. Om Purnamada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.